this gathering of all the forces at the end of time is a demonic power.
This is Marina Abramovich. She is like the high occult witch of Hollywood. Here she is standing with Jacob Rothschild. The very powerful, intimidating figure behind them is a depiction of Satan or Lucifer. And I think it's important because as we start to see how she described what those shamans told her, which is he's acting as this great disruptor. Okay, so she says he's the occult magician of the highest order, designed to bring chaos and shake things up. Of the Great Seal of the United States, the New World Order begins during the time of chaos. But here the occult is actually printed on American currency, Order of a New Age. That's Novus, Ordo, Seclorum. This is when the Son of Promise arrives on Earth. There is so much symbolism pointing to Saturn. Today, we're going to try to help people understand how all this relates. Why do they keep using the symbolism of Saturn? Why are they using this term Golden Age?
But you go back, the spiritual sort of insider religion of Rome is Mithraism, and Mithraism was originally the main religion of ancient Babylon.
And I want people to pause this and Google Apotheosis of Washington. It says, America's Pharaoh being transformed into a god within the Capitol dome, the womb of Isis, in sight of the obelisk of Osiris.
They're all trying to bring back Babylon.
But we're seeing theater. When it comes down to it, Bill Gates is happy with what's going on. Klaus Schwab is happy with what's going on. As he gets in, he just loads his cabinet with Vatican loyalists and globalist loyalists. Pete Hegseth is a member of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. Interesting about them is their whole goal, part of the Templars' mission was, they're called Templars because they wanted to build the temple. So now I'd like to offer, now that we have all of this information, I'd like to offer some breakdown on what the meaning of no hand on the Bible is.
Yeah, we see that in the Bible that the Lord says, I swear by myself. You know, it's like God is the only one that can swear on himself. So in a sense, swearing without the Bible is like swearing on yourself.
I think it's pretty clear. The 47th inauguration marks the transition from the material to the spiritual, where this whole movement is just essentially filled with demons. Let's get started. We are going to, the last episode, we touched on the fact that there's a lot of going on behind Trump's family history, the connections around him that point to a Roman royal power behind him. And look, let each person be convicted in their own hearts and minds. I wish we had time to break down even further and provide even more proof, but ultimately, we're opening the door. We're showing people where to look and what to look for and allowing them to make their own determinations. Well, today, we'd like to continue that journey because everything we did in that last episode was really to build up what we're going to cover today. That's the occult inauguration, the 47th presidential inauguration of Donald Trump, where we're going to review the signs and symbols that show Trump was just initiated as kind of a God king. So here we go.
In 2 Corinthians 11:13 through 15, we're warned that false Christs, deceitful workers, are going to transform themselves into the apostles of Christ, and it's no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers are also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. So the warning that we are given in the last days that this power is going to deceive many people into thinking that it's actually on God's side. It's actually Christ's power that they're joining to, which is the thing that Christ warns over and over again, do not be deceived.
We're revealing the occult manifestation, something that is also found in God's word as he's warning us about this system that is preparing the road for the appearance of someone coming that will pretend to be Christ. I mean, it's almost hard to wrap your mind around.
It is, you know, and when you think about when these things are being exposed and you sort of think, how is it possible that the whole world is going to accept this counterfeit? How are we going to, what is there really a danger that we would accept Satan instead of Christ? And that's really the trick of what's taking place, is that in order to reach that place where we would accept a counterfeit Christ that would come and say that he's Christ, but he's not, we'd have to be brought to a place as a society, as a world, where we're ready to sort of swallow an occult way of thinking and yet think of it as Christianity. So the occult world has to become kind of mainstream, and you have to tie all the religions and every belief system sort of in together as one, so everyone thinks it's all one thing. So
Exactly.
there's a lot of it's like a magic trick is taking place to try to bring everybody together into one place so that they can accept this. It's sort of like you're being evangelized 24/7 in society to sort of accept this sort of different way of Christianity, sort of a new age Christ that appeals to everyone.
And he's ready to deceive them by senses. They're going to trust their eyes, they're going to trust their ears, their hearts, but our hearts are deceptively wicked. That's why the Bible acts as this great standard, because we can constantly check our hearts, feelings, and emotions, which is constantly under the attack of the devil.
I was just thinking as you were saying that, I saw a little clip on X of it was what was it? I think it was the very end of a local newscast, and there was sometimes in local newscasts, like for whether they have like a camera stationed like overlooking a horizon or a bridge or something, and they're just kind of doing an outro or something, and it's just a feed, a live feed that's just always on there, and they just cut to it in the newscast, and it's a night shot, and there's like what seems to be like a UFO crossing through the frame, and the newscasters just kind of talking about it and say, what is that? Is that just a UFO? And then they just continue with the close of the cast, almost just like we're becoming so normalized to seeing things in the skies, to seeing signs and wonders, that we're just sort of being sensitized to a time when things are going to become very miraculous. And we're being prepared for something this year.
Yes. And it's the externalization of this hierarchy. Today, we're going to more decode a lot of how the occult is viewing what's going on right now. And I'll give a couple examples. This is Marina Abramovich. Have you heard of Marina Abramovich before?
Yes, I have. I actually, when I was in Hollywood, it was a topic of conversation among some people. Have you heard of her? And they were talking about, how amazing she was.
Mm-hmm. She is like the high occult witch of Hollywood, and I wouldn't just limit her scope to Hollywood. She is often used in Hollywood because she's got many pictures with celebrities, Jay-Z, Lady Gaga, Gwen Stefani, and she hosts some horrific parties. I mean, pictures I can't even share because they're humans made out of cake, and they're essentially eating the cake and cannibalizing, and it's just crazy stuff. She was asked by Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to be an ambassador to the Ukraine. Now, this is anybody who does a quick search on this person will see that she has a lot of connections directly to a demonic, satanic worldview. I mean, even Microsoft had to remove a commercial they did with Bill Gates because there was so much outcry over the Satanism found in the commercial that Microsoft had to take it down. So just quickly, she has been part of a number of these processes that they call spirit cooking that involve a whole bunch of different high-end net worth individuals. We're not going to get into any of that. We're just simply laying the groundwork that this is a very powerful occult witch. It's very real. People writing these things off as if they're not real. You're not doing a service for how real Satan's kingdom is and how sophisticated it is. Here she is standing with Jacob Rothschild, and they're standing quite intently in front of a very specific painting that was done by Sir Thomas Lawrence, and it's called Satan Summoning His Legions. The very powerful, intimidating figure behind them is quite literally a picture of a depiction of Satan or Lucifer. And you'll notice that he is not a red-horned, devil-hooved entity, because that's not what he would look like. He was made beautiful. He was made perfect. He was one of the most beautiful of all of God's creations. So just the idea that these two intently standing in front of an image of Satan, where you can find it's based on a subject called Milton's Paradise Lost, describing the line 330, which is very Masonic. It says, "Awake, arise, or be forever fallen." So you can just kind of see the overtones here are strictly satanic. There's no other way to interpret these things. The reason we're kind of laying the groundwork that she's a very powerful high occult witch is because she tells two stories in two different interviews about how she went to go see some shamans. Now, I used to be a New Ager. I spent time around shamans. I even practiced some of the practices that were involved in some of these retreats that they were involved in exploration of consciousness. So I can relate to the field with which she's talking. And I just want to put our frame of reference on. There's either something is from God or it's not from God. Now, does God use psychedelics to channel entities to get information?
No.
At no point does he condone such things. So if people are getting information in those channeling sessions, is it fair to assume that those are demonic?
Yeah. I mean, anytime that you open up yourself to be influenced like that, you're not listening for the voice of God. You're not receiving it from his word. You're basically cutting off your frontal lobe, your decision-making power, your moral choice centers being, sort of disengaged or, short-circuited, allowing something else to come in. And that's really what drugs and, those kind of experiences you're saying, conscious altering experiences. It's pretty common in many pagan religions to do this kind of thing, where you put yourself in a trance to allow something else to come and speak through you.
And so when we get information from a high occult witch who's going to visit shamans who are going through very particular, difficult and painful processes to get to the state where these information is received, I think we should take a listen, because it's going to put a lot of context on what we're about to see unfold when we really get into this inauguration. Let's take a look.
I just to share with you one really funny opinion. But there is in Lapland, there is a group of the shamans there who do something called collective dreaming. They will go together in seclusion and do the rituals with, eating very little food and being in solitude for a long time. And they will go and dream the dreams. And the dream have to be collective, same dream. So coming out of this dream, once of the shaman told me that actually the best thing happened in this planet right now is the Trump to be the president. And I said, how is this possible? It's the best thing to happen. He said, yes, because he's so irrational, he's so crazy. That's actually create that awakening, that we finally wake up. Because before it will be another guy and everything looks similar. But he's so different than anything else. So he's the magician who waking us up. What do you think about that kind of theory?
So that's the first time she tells this story. And I think it's important because as we start to see how she described what those shamans kind of told her, which is he's acting as this great disruptor. And we're going to see that's exactly what that Trump inauguration showed. It was an occult procession of basically an end of one order and the beginning of a new one.
Right. And in fact, many people voted for him for that whole purpose because he is going to be a disruptor.
Yes. And so now, once we can understand, because the whole point of us decoding the occult side of this is so people don't have to spend time thinking that there's something in there that they need to find out or learn, that they should spend that time just on their Bibles. So what we're revealing today is going to reveal all of this from the occult side so that people don't need to spend as much time on that. They can spend more time focusing on what the Word of God says, because ultimately that's going to be what the great test is over. So here she is a second time telling the same story. And just to confirm, people say it, she's saying it. She's talking about the same story with the shamans. So she's saying the shamans told her this story, but just, again, she's telling the story and confirming that he's playing as this kind of great magician that's being used to create chaos to transform the end of one age into the beginning of another.
Trump is the best thing happened ever to us. That he is the magician of the highest order. That he is there in his irrational mind to create confusion in order that the human being can find new order. And it's not so stupid thinking about this in that way. It's completely turning things upside down.
Okay, so she says he's the occult magician of the highest order, designed to bring chaos and shake things up. Has he done a good job of that so far, starting his new term here?
Yeah, and it's also very entertaining too. So it actually is getting everyone's attention. In fact, his approval ratings are higher than it ever was even in his first term, which is blowing people's minds. But
yeah,
it's the whole world is sort of, watching what's happening.
Engulfed by the magician. Now, here's in the Occult Magician, this is how they describe the magician's role. The magician is the initiator. This is going to become important as we pull this back. Trump is not the end of something. He's the beginning of something. He is the initiator and understands the cosmos and other realms. This person is a master and has mastered intuition and knows how to communicate the divine to mortals. It's because of people like this that fools awaken. It's the magician's job to teach, excite people's curiosity, and to direct their paths. So I find this especially fascinating because communicate the divine to mortals. We're going to learn a little bit later of 4 examples of Trump pulling magic tricks and how people seem to not see it. And it's going to be very interesting because when you put it under this lens of he's actually communicating the divine to mortals, things like his phrase MAGA, we're going to take a look at how that may be the divine, but not the divine from the Bible, but maybe the divine from somewhere else.
Yeah, you can kind of see how the United States, the lamb-like beast, does really become the false prophet, because this is a sort of way of kind of being a false prophet, really, too.
Mm-hmm. So we're contending here today that the inauguration that happened was the coronation of a king. And right off the bat, as soon as he was in, a representative brought a constitutional amendment, proposed a constitutional amendment to allow Trump to seek a 3rd term. Now, the likelihood of that passing is historically impossible, but this is the mindset. This is, again, if we're taking the angle that Trump has just been initiated as kind of maybe this God king through this ceremony, the actions that he's taken are starting to look like that of a king. And seeking a 3rd term would definitely be one of those things that you'd want to see in the works if you were looking to set up a kingdom. We really want to just kind of frame the conversation when we talked even during the election cycle. Like, you have the Democrats in blue, the Republicans in red, and you see here, I didn't make this, so it's not a perfect representation, but it gives you the illustration, the idea of having this swamp, cabal, corrupt LGBTQ side pinned against the right, Christian nationalism, basically globalist versus nationalist ideology, to create a synthesis, which is kind of what we're seeing now, is this synthesis where Trump has promised change and return to morals and values and certain things. And in some places that's happened, but in other key areas, some really nefarious things seem to be happening, which go in the face of, let's say, a one world financial system that will allow or limit the no buying, no selling of people who may not agree, which would infer significant surveillance, tech dictatorships. And I think when we look at the people that were at Trump's inauguration, the whole tech world was essentially there. There are some synthesis things that are actually happening here, and it seems to be merging towards something that the occult world is kind of telling us in codes and symbols. So essentially, what we're seeing is his 2016 inauguration and his whole presidential campaign was really to get that public support behind him. It was for the people. It was make America great again. I'm your guy to drain the swamp and all this stuff. And it was very much done outside and in the view of the public to make him seem like a man of the people. The 2025 one couldn't have been more different. It was ultra exclusive. It was the elites of the world. And there were other things in there that I think we're going to see point to this coronation process. Again, we underestimate generally how sophisticated Satan's system is, how sophisticated the plan is, how many generations things go back. They really play the long game.
As I say, just the whole fact that it was held inside, and the reason being twofold that was given is that it was very cold, and that it was because of all the safety issues, the threats against his life that were there, that it made sense to hold it inside. Well, that sounds really good, but when we get into the depth of this, you're going to see this had to have been planned too, because it was very significant.
Exactly. And it starts with the number 47. When we start seeing how all this fits together, we start to kind of piece a picture that it seems like the whole lost election, what happened, he was indicted during that time, he had an assassination attempt, he came out stronger than ever. And it's going to be kind of our contention after we look at everything today that he had to be the 47. He is the 47, and we're going to look at the esoteric link between Saturn, the number 47, and the Trump inauguration here. So we've talked about now for several episodes, everybody's talking about the Golden Age. It is pretty much the slogan attached to the Trump administration. Wouldn't you agree so far?
It is, absolutely. And it goes right in line with everything else the occult world is saying about this age that we're entering as well.
And anybody who looks into it can see that there is so much symbolism pointing to Saturn. It's over and over and over. It seems to be Saturn as this emblem that is marking some transition. We're at a transition spot. This is Grok's new logo, and this is Stellar. It's a cryptocurrency that is essentially about to be used by the UN and governments all over the world to be part of universal basic income and a whole host of other things that will be on the blockchain. All of this seems to be centralized around this concept of Saturn. So the Golden Era and Saturn are absolutely synonymous with one another. Now, most people may not or have, actually, I know some people have seen this, but there are black cubes like this all over the world. Have you seen stuff like this before?
Absolutely, yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's Mecca too, actually.
Exactly. And you'll find these black cubes, and I've always kind of never been sure what it meant. And so today we're going to try to help people understand how all this relates. Why do they keep using the symbolism of Saturn? Why are they using this term Golden Age? And so now we're going to talk about how many layers deep this goes. So the 47 number. 4 in the occult represents structure, law, and material order. 7 represents spiritual wisdom, completion, and hidden knowledge. So when you're looking at this black cube, what it's referencing is, in the occult, the black cube is the material world. And the idea is, at some point, someone breaks the material world free of its dense mass and frees it to become spiritual light. So it essentially marks this transition from darkness to light.
It's interesting, though. It makes me think of Minecraft. You know, I've got kids, and, you know, Minecraft is an incredibly popular world. So if the cube represents, you know, all of this, the structural law, material order, this game, this kind of sandbox game that you can do anything you want, and it is made up of cubes and how you arrange cubes. It is sort of like relating to that, you know, basically being God of the world that you live in that sandbox or that you operate in. It's kind of an interesting. There was a knockoff game. I don't know if it's still out there. It was called Eden. It was even had the word Eden, and it was the same idea with everything is like a cube-based kind of sandbox game where you're basically the creator in Eden.
And so you have this whole representation of our material world wrapped up in this cube. So anytime you see that, we are all locked in the material world. And the 47 is here, this master of the 47 unlocks the material world into the spiritual. So together, 47 symbolizes mastery of time, and we've seen Saturn relates to time, Chronos, we've talked about that, so the Golden Age, the mastery of time, even the TikTok ban, a lot of what's going on here is in relation to time because it's symbolizing that we are in now a transitionary phase. It says, and material limitation, so mastery of time and material limitation, unlocking the potential to transcend Saturn's control. Esoteric tradition suggests a hidden 47-year Saturn cycle marking key transitions in cosmic and karmic structures. One of the things that people may say is, well, you know, you're just assuming, what are you talking about, these occult numbers? How do you know, these people are actually occultists? This could be all coincidence. And as we continue to build here, we're just building layer upon layer. I wanted to introduce as a piece of evidence that the highest end people in the world are very high occultists. Here is Christine Lagarde. She was at the time the head of the European Central Bank, and now I think she is was at the IMF first and then central bank. But anyway, she's always been heads of these large transnational financial institutions. And here she gives the press club a quick 101 in the occult meaning of the number 7. Let's take a listen.
Now I'm going to test you numerology skills by asking you to think about the magic 7. Okay? Most of you will know that 7 is quite a number in all sorts of themes, religions, and I'm sure that you can compress numbers as well. So, if we think about 2014. All right, I'm just giving you 2014, you drop the 0, 14, 2 times 7. Okay, that's just by way of example, and we're going to carry on. So 2014 will be a milestone, and hopefully...
I just want to kind of stop right there. She's just teasing the amount of information she knows. She actually wears the owl of the Bohemian Grove quite often. If you Google Christine Lagarde and her owl, she loves her little owl. She's a Bohemian Grove member. She's a high occult witch, and she's just introducing, teasing the 7. And obviously we know, and we advocate for often, that 7 is God's number as the primary number of creation, and his rest day as the mark of him as the creator.
Yeah, and the number 7, of course, we know is God's number. Like you said, it's a number of completion. It's a number of perfection. But the occult world, of course, has its counterfeit as well.
And they're well aware of it. Like they actively use this in their day-to-day lives. And she's kind of just teasing at it here. We'll keep going.
A magic year in many respects. It will mark the 100th anniversary of the First World War back in 1914. It will mark the 70th anniversary, drop the 0, 7, of the Bretton Woods Conference that actually gave birth to the IMF. And it will be the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. 25th. It will also mark the 7th anniversary of the financial market jitters that quickly turned into the greatest global economic calamity since the Great Depression. The crisis still lingers. Yet, optimism is in the air. We've left the deep freeze behind us, and the horizon looks just a bit brighter. So my hope and my wish for 2014 is that after those 7 miserable years, weak and fragile, we have 7 strong years. Now, I don't know whether the G7 will have anything to do with it, or whether it will be the G20. I certainly hope that the IMF will have something to do with it.
It almost sounds like the kind of reasoning you use maybe when you read a horoscope and you try to bend it to sort of fit whatever is going on in your life, your world. So, so for those that think that sometimes when we talk about these things that we're sort of wearing tinfoil hats here, it's really interesting to hear that kind of reasoning and that kind of numerology coming out of the mouth of the people that are actually behind the scenes that run the world. And it's really rife in that world. They live by this kind of reasoning and thinking.
They live by it. It rules the very life that they live. They live by it. Even the 7-year famine, 7-year plenty, the references, the year 2025, by her reasoning, drop the 0. She says the 2-5 at the end of the year is 7, and you drop the 0, the 2 times 4 is 14, divided by the 2 is 7. So they love these things that kind of all, it's like puzzle pieces all fitting together, but it's all worthless. It is all garbage. Now, the God of this world, Satan, who claims God of this world, he has given them their delicacies, and they love it. And so they think that these things have deeper meaning. But we're going to continue because there's a lot more to cover. So this 7, this 4 and 7, this cube, this occult meaning, the reason that there are these black cubes all over the place is because they're saying that you are locked in a material world, and something's going to need to come save you from this material world. And that's where the role of Saturn kind of comes in. Saturn's role as the enforcer of karma and cycles means he dictates the end of one age and the beginning of another. Okay, what's Trump just telling everyone? I'm going to bring a golden age. End of one age, beginning of another. 47 represents the secret knowledge required to break free from Saturn's control and return to this golden age. Alchemy aligns with this concept where Saturn, lead, must be transmuted into gold. So here, the material world is the lead. The place we're going, the place that Trump wants to take everyone, is the golden age, symbolizing spiritual enlightenment and a return to divine order. We've got to get back to God. So he is acting as this high occult magician, and we're going to continue to prove this, but I'm just laying it out as frank as I can be, that is here to kind of transform us, break the material world, the lead world, and bring in the golden age. Isn't it kind of interesting that Saturn's alchemy is from lead to gold And here we are talking about the golden age that's being promised to everyone.
It seems so it can't be coincidental, because I mean, even there's a saying that in politics that nothing happens by chance. So the fact that he had a term, didn't have a term, and then and came back again as 47, not 45 through 2 terms, but 45, then 47.
Yeah.
This is all too. Satan is a very master planner as far as all these things coming to this conclusion. Because let's say, if 6,000 years. It says in Revelation 12, he came down to this earth with great wrath after the crucifixion, after Christ won at the cross, and he knew he had a short time left, and he understands things. He knows his time's almost up, and he's been using the intellect that God gave him to work against his master, to plan all of these things and to counterfeit everything that God is doing. So we can't just take these things as sort of for granted that it's just coincidental. It's like there is a power that's out there working, and it's manifest in this world.
And now we're starting to see why the references to Saturn, are so overwhelming. The 47 and the Saturn represent the breaking free of this material cube. Now, it's interesting because the picture we're painting here is Trump is acting as this occult agent to transfer the world from a material world to a religious or spiritual world. I would say spiritual delusion that's coming with miracles. This is going to overwhelm the world like a flood. It's going to come on them like a whirlwind. This overwhelming change to spiritual is also described in the Bible. This move from a kind of a secular atheist worldview to a world where there are no atheists. So we see the occult side and the Bible are actually describing the same events, but from different angles. One's in like this hidden knowledge and that all of this 47 symbolism and the black cubes, where the other one's just telling you straight up in a lineage of history what's happening and who's behind it and why. It's really amazing to see. So we're going to continue because there's this symbolism to Saturn just keeps getting to be more and more and more. One of the outfits that Melania wore that kind of really got my attention was this one here. And the whole process, she was very much rigid. 2016, she was much looser. She was smiling and moving around, enjoying herself in a way that was just seemed like relatively normal. This time, she kept her eyes out of field of view almost the whole time, and her outfit is actually representative of a hat in the Catholic clergy known as the Saturno. This is a hat that has its name because it has a reminiscent ring of the planet Saturn, and it's often worn by Catholic clerics. In fact, even her two-tone light and dark contrasting matches the two-tone contrasting of the priest garb. And again, from the occult viewpoint, we're looking at a reference to Saturn and the light and dark aspects, the duality of kind of the whole occult service that we're going to jump into here. So kind of piecing some of these things together, the Saturn elements, again, just kind of submitting pieces of evidence. Each person can be convicted in their own heart and mind. But Black Cube represents the material world, the Saturn, that the people need to be freed from by some agent. That agent ends up being the 47, the transition agent. Trump Towers even has a black cube. Have you heard of the phrase Novus, Ordo, Seclorum before?
Yeah, as an American, I certainly handled a lot of currency in my time, and yeah, it's there on the dollar bill.
It's one of those things where people aren't really sure why it's there. They kind of know it's there, but it's not a big deal. This is another way that the occult side is proving what the Bible says to be true, in my opinion, because when we contend that, America is the center of all this, it's going to lead to the mark of the beast and the image of the beast, and Protestantism, all that stuff, people could say, well, your Bible interpretation is wrong. But here the occult is actually printed on American currency, Order of a New Age. That's Novus, Ordo, Seclorum. And that basically is saying America is the place and was founded on the principle that they were going to be the means by which this new age would be brought in. And there's the whole phrase came from the writings of a Roman poet. And it's called kind of this Novus Ordo Seclorum prophecy, where it's found in one of Virgil's books. And it's very interesting because when I started digging into this, it really kind of blew my mind on how many little occult connections are happening right in front of our eyes. Because the Novus Ordo Seclorum prophecy derived from Virgil's Eclogue number 4, it foretells the arrival of a new golden age marked by the birth of a divine child who will restore justice and bring about a renewed world order. I'll just stop right here and say we are not saying Donald Trump is this child. What we're saying is here's this prophecy that became the seal on the United States currency about this new golden age. And let's see if it has any comparisons to what's happening in the real world. This prophecy, linked to the return of Saturn's reign, suggests a cyclical transformation where past and future merge into an era of peace, prosperity, and divine rule. Is that what we're being promised right now? Maybe not the divine rule part. Let's leave that out because that maybe is the secret thing.
We're going to get a little, as we go further in this presentation, you'll see that everything, having to do with the United States, as far as its founding, there is something behind its design and its founding that is Masonic. And it's like this whole thing was laid out to be the place where this new birth and this new age would come about, where it would start.
Exactly, which is why now it makes sense why it's on the money. They were saying from the get-go, this is the birthplace of the new age. The Bible says the same thing, but from the flip side saying, hey, this whole world order, this whole mark of the beast, no buy, no sell system, it's going to be from the American power. Again, both sides saying the same thing. In esoteric and occult interpretations, this new order of the ages, which is the Novus Ordo Seclorum, signifies the rise of a messianic figure often associated with Apollo, the son of Jupiter. We're going to look into this more, who is seen as a counterfeit Christ leading a deceptive enlightenment. So this is really, this golden age is promised one thing, but in reality, it's going to be something completely different. This phrase was later adopted for the Great Seal of the United States, fueling theories that America was founded with the esoteric mission to usher in the prophesied New World Order. Is that basically what the Bible says that America is going to do?
100%. In fact, a previous presentation we did, 2 presentations ago, we did America and Israel and prophecy. We really went into Revelation 13 and talked about, the close of probation at the end of the 70 weeks and how everything is, already kind of laid out for us so that we would not be deceived by this. And in a sense, if you haven't seen that presentation, it would be a good time to go back and watch that, because we really go into the Bible study that shows you that the United States is that lamb-like beast that comes up in Revelation 13:11. So we would not be deceived about what's taking place now.
It is the power that brings in the Novus Ordo Seclorum. It's saying the exact same thing. So let's look at this prophecy a little bit. It says, according to Vigil and Sybil, the prophetess of Apollo in Roman mythology, whose prophecy formed the Novus Ordo Seclorum of the Great Seal of the United States, the New World Order begins during the time of chaos. This is when the Son of Promise arrives on earth, Apollo incarnate, a pagan savior born of a new breed of men sent down from heaven, when heroes and gods are blended together. There's a particular key figure in the world right now by the name of Elon Musk, and he really loves this phrase, Novus Ordo Seclorum. In fact, he wore it once, a jacket with it imprinted on the back, very difficult to see, but that's what it says, Novus Ordo Seclorum. And then he's wearing almost like a priest-like garb with the black on the inside and the white on the outside. He looks like he's the good guy, but inside we see the real thing. And then he posted this with Trump, which his son's name is little x. X in the Greek is Christ. And when we do our expose on Musk at some point, we're going to see that the X to him is the Christ, but the Antichrist, the Pontifex Maximus, he is waiting for the Apollo himself. He's waiting for this figure to appear, and his son X is an homage to his God. It's the little Christ is his son, and he's posting him with his arms out. I mean, the symbolism is almost too much for some people to even believe, because it's so obvious. So let's keep picking this apart, because it gets even more interesting here. It says, but to understand why such a fanciful prophecy about Apollo, son of Jupiter, returning to earth should be important to you. In ancient literature, Jupiter was the Roman replacement of Yahweh as the greatest of the gods, a counter Yahweh. His son Apollo is a replacement of Jesus, a counter Jesus. This Apollo comes to rule the final new world order when justice returns old Saturn's reign, the ancient goddess Justice who returns Saturn's reign. Now, I'm going to kind of help decode that a little bit, because essentially what it's saying is the Saturn is not the end goal. The Saturn, the 47, the breaking free from the black cube, is to transition people to the spiritual. We are now transitioning to the spiritual to await the arrival of the spiritual one that's coming. So Trump, as the false breaker of the material world, so let's just say, if Trump, as the 47th president, symbolizes the initiation of the Saturnian age, then his role is not that of a true liberator, but of one who facilitates the shift into the next phase of deception. This aligns with the mythological pattern where the return of Saturn's reign is marked as a counterfeit golden age, a period that appears to be one of renewal and justice, but in fact, the final dominion of a deceptive power. Wow. So like right now, what is Trump's collective technocratic elite presidential group doing? They're literally going in and exposing all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. What better way to hide than to hide out as the good guy? I mean, again, the Bible is constantly warning us in the last days that that there's a danger that even the elect might be deceived.
And the whole premise is based on deception. Jesus said, "Take heed lest any man deceive you." And here, this occult procession is happening to pretend to bring in this golden age, and then part of that is to bring out, like it says in this prophecy, is to like bring out justice, a return. Justice returns, return old Saturn's ways. So essentially he's saying, let's get back to God's ways. And we're not saying that we shouldn't get back to God's ways. We're saying the version that's being pitched is a false version of that. And all of the exposure that's going on, is it exposing real fraud? Absolutely. But it's doing it strategically, shining little lights in areas to make it seem like they're liberating everybody from the fraud and exposure, when in reality, that's not what's happening at all. I mean, the "you said" exposure we found in the Project 2025 document. That's a Knight of Malta thing. That's a Vatican thing. The Vatican actually does the same thing. They shine light against themselves in the right places at the right time to get the illicit response that they need to gain sympathy and to gain support, essentially.
You're playing both sides of it, so you have full control over what each side does, so you can, very theatrically bring about each side, and that's exactly what's happening.
And I'll say, as somebody who's familiar with blockchain and how distributed ledger technology works and how Doge works, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I'm saying I probably know more than the average person on these things. There's absolutely no way humanly possible that they've made the audits that they've made in the time that they've made them. It's very clear that these efforts have started well before, and what we're seeing is like a well-scripted stage show, which is following this Novus Ordo Seclorum prophecy exactly, which Musk tweets about and talks about all the time, which is this is their false enlightenment, their false exposure process. Again, we're not saying that it's not real exposing things. It's that they're strategically exposing things that they want people to see to bring in this false age of enlightenment. I hope that makes sense to people.
So, in Satan's world, not everyone gets along. And so just because we see, certain, Elon Musk is not like Sam Altman and vice versa, it doesn't mean that they're all sort of not working for the same thing, but there's competition and fighting amongst themselves. So there isn't, in the Hegelian dialectic, it's not like everyone's really acting. It's just that, this is how Satan's kingdom kind of works. Everyone's kind of in competition with one another. In the occult world, for sure, there's always a fighting for supremacy. And it's, it's just like when Alexander died, the four winds of heaven, right? All the generals had to fight it out. Who was going to take the kingdom? I mean, it's like, it's all through brutality and fighting and competition, survival of the fittest wins. So there is a natural, fight going on, you could say, but it is controlled, and underneath all of it, they all are working for the same thing.
It's the same with the Roman families. It's like if you've ever seen the show Succession, like it's a miserable power struggle amongst these families and infighting. And it says a house divided against itself cannot stand. And it doesn't. Satan's house doesn't stand. It eventually falls apart completely. So yes, there's lots of infighting. And I think the second piece that I think is really important is we start to see this role of Trump as the 47, the breaker of the black cube, is that his role is to usher in the Apollo. The Saturn is not the Apollo. So if we follow the Vigilian prophecy referenced earlier, Apollo as the son of Jupiter is the false Messiah, the Antichrist figure who brings in the New World Order. Under this interpretation, Trump would not necessarily be the Apollo himself, but rather the one who sets the stage for this figure. The world is led to believe that the old ways, symbolized by Saturn, will bring justice, so a conversion back to God. Remember, he doesn't want to issue a new way, he wants the old way. And so the Saturn transitions the old way to the spiritual way, which is the motto of get back to God. And now that way is established through justice, which is they're doing all the exposure things. But now it's setting the stage. What it's really doing is setting the stage for the final deception. And that's what I'm hoping people can do when they watch this, is see through all of this to say, Trump is not the Antichrist. Trump is not the end-all be-all. Musk is not the end-all be-all. These are the agents here to pave the way for the one to show up. Their job is to spiritualize the world. Trump's job is to spiritualize it. Musk's job is to get the world onto the blockchain. I would say Musk and Thiel and Ellison is to get everything onto the blockchain for the final no buy, no sell system. So these two elements are working in harmony with each other. But even looking from the occult side is not seeing Trump as the final savior Messiah. They're seeing him as the Saturn, the transition agent that leads to the Apollo coming and showing up. So now we're going to take a step further, because we've laid enough groundwork to kind of now talk about why it was brought inside, why the inauguration was really brought inside. And when we look at the Capitol building, we're going to see that it's actually the womb of Isis. So for most people, when you see a presidential inauguration, you'll see the president is generally standing in the center middle podium down at the lower end and is clearly surrounded by large amounts of people. And if you were to flip the camera around the other way, you would see even more of the public. This is a for the people procession. But Trump, as we've kind of said, moved it inside for various reasons. We could debate what those are, if they're legitimate or not, doesn't matter. But he went from here and instead was initiated under this statue inside of this dome. Now, a couple pieces of information I want people to have before we dive inside. The very Capitol building grounds themselves in 1669 was called Rome. It was owned by a guy named Francis Pope, and he had a waterway near him that he named Tiber Creek after the Tiber River. People may not know that Rome is famously built as a city on 7 hills. Washington, D.C. also has encompassing 7 hills: Capitol Hill, Meridian Hill, Flora Hills, Forest Hill, Hillbrook, Hillcrest, and Knox Hill. So the parallels are remarkable. The actual grounds where the Capitol building sits used to be called Rome, and now today sits in almost exact replica of the Vatican that sits as one of the signature pieces of American liberty and freedom. Just that alone has a lot of coincidence going off in one story, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I was just thinking of the White House too, right? It's called the White House because it was, Andrew White owned the property that they bought it from, where the White House has been built. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many ties back. Maryland, Maryland,
mm-hmm.
the
Virginia,
state is
Maryland.
All roads lead to Rome. And the third, the second beast that comes up in Revelation 13, all it does when it has the power that it can get, it points back to the first beast. And it seems that's where it's come from.
And Washington, D.C. isn't even part of the United States. So we're not going to get into that whole conversation with Vatican City and the city of London. But it's a little homage city-state to Rome. And this Capitol building has a lot going on that people walking around and in the tours maybe don't really know or notice. On the top is this statue, which we'll take a quick look at later, but it's essentially a composite statue. It's a composite statue of the gods Athena, Hercules, Liberty, Minerva. It's called the Statue of Freedom, but in reality, we're going to see that it's just all different names for the same entity. But the most important thing that we're going to kind of zoom in on is the canopy inside. So you kind of go straight down. It would be through the womb, right into this rotunda here that actually has a name called, and I want people to pause this and Google Apotheosis of Washington, because you will see exactly what it is and what it means. Apotheosis has a very interesting meaning when we're considering all the occult connections happening here. So just so people can get a frame of reference, they took it from outside of the public to inside, and this procession was done directly under this Apotheosis of Washington. What does the word apotheosis mean? Apotheosis is a sudden transformation that occurs after death, where a person is recognized as a god or goddess and worshipped as such. The goal of apotheosis is to achieve immortality and eternal life. I think that sounds exactly like what Freemasonry teaches. That is the end result of Freemasonry is they teach you to achieve immortality and eternal life and to become a god. And that is the painting by which Trump was initiated under.
It makes me think of the original lie told to mankind, which is the greatest lie that's still being told today, which is you shall surely not die, but your eyes will be open and you will become like God. And this is exactly, this is again, this is not a tinfoil hat thinking. This is just taking what is actually out there, what they're actually doing. The apotheosis of Washington, all these things are real things. The occult world is manifest before our eyes, and we live in it in a sense, and most of us are asleep to it.
And that's what a lot of these secret societies hope. They have this outward meaning, they have their outward purposes, their charitable organizations, and then their inward esoteric meanings. And people walk around not realizing that there's this apotheosis, that the word apotheosis is literally the deification process. Now let's zoom in a little bit on this ceiling. What you see at the top is essentially George Washington in purple garb, and he's deified sitting next to liberty and justice, I believe, are the two gods. We'll see here in a second. Then you have three other gods, all pagan, a Roman, a Greek, and then this one's America. And we talked about this before the recording today. We were talking about how the eagle always kind of goes back to Rome. But you actually correctly identified that it stems back even further.
It actually goes back originally to Babylon. And if you look at, and we'll have to cover this when we do the seven churches at some point when we do that study, but you look at the history of Rome and where it got its beliefs. I mean, obviously it's founded really coming out of the ashes of the Greek. And so Greeks also had the eagle as well. But you go back, the spiritual sort of insider religion of Rome is Mithraism. And Mithraism was originally the main religion of ancient Babylon. And so what happened was that, the Roman general Pompeo, he visited Pergamum, and he witnessed their Mithric rites, and he basically decided to bring those into the Roman legions, and that's how Mithraism came into the Roman Empire. And with it came all of it, including the title, which we understand as Pontifex Maximus, which the Caesar took on, and of course is still used today by the Pope of Rome.
And that's powerful background and information, because anytime you see the eagle used, it is hearkening back to that same power. And here the Bible says at the end of time, it's a system called Mystery Babylon. So we talk a lot about Rome and Protestantism, but what we're really talking about is the ancient Babylonian kingdom that has never died. It's the doctrines, that system that has never died and will ultimately come to a head in this false Christian-looking version of it. But it's been Babylon the whole time. And here we see in this profession, the Tower of Babel was to try to elevate man to godhood. And here we see Trump is being inaugurated under this procession and this painting of the apotheosis. So let's read a little bit more about this apotheosis, because I think it's just fascinating, because it's telling us what's happening underneath it, why they chose to bring it inside. The apotheosis of Washington depicts George Washington ascending to the heavens and becoming a god. In the Masonic tradition, they talk about Jacob's ladder. And in Jacob's ladder, in the actual vision, he sees angels ascending up and down the ladder. Well, they say that that's man's path to godhood, coming up and down this ladder to reach divinity. But what is that Jacob's ladder actually pointing to?
It's pointing to Jesus Christ as the only way that we may be saved, and that the angels are constantly ministering to humanity from heaven to basically bring about this plan of salvation. They're the hands and feet of God. So the angels are ascending up and down the ladder, working with humanity. and as messengers for God. And it's a complete counterfeit. Again, it's taking Christ out of the picture, which is putting you in the place of God, which is right where Satan wanted to be.
And to your point, exactly, here's George Washington in the place of God, one hand up, one hand down, as above, so below. Is a book open. The woman's holding a Roman fasciae in her hand. And so we're seeing the deification process, this apotheosis for presidential figures. Washington is draped in purple, a royal color with a rainbow arch at his feet. Now, the rainbow arch has both occult meanings as well as biblical meanings, and that royal color purple is also attributed to royal in the sanctuary service that we're going to tackle in the next 2 episodes after this. There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on. We talked about Babylon earlier. Babylon really is Satan's original counterfeit kingdom of God's on the earth. And so when all these events of this world and all the machinations of all the behind the scenes, the confederacies and the conspiracies, they're all trying to bring back Babylon. And that's why the Bible refers to it as Babylon in the book of Revelation, because essentially what Satan was trying to do with ancient Babylon is the same thing that he's actually still trying to do today. And it's basically build Babylon on this earth, which Babylon really means. It means gate to the gods, Babel, it's the gate of God, the way to God.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing more and more that there's something very strange going on here when we're considering all of the things happening. So let's continue. Through Masonic alchemy, remember that led the physical world to the gold, to the spiritual. Presidential apotheosis, that is the leader of the United States, America's Pharaoh. That's an interesting phrase that this source has used, given that there is a very Pharaoh-like object in Washington, D.C. I wonder if people could think of it. It says, America's Pharaoh being transformed into a god within the Capitol dome, the womb of Isis, in sight of the obelisk of Osiris. That's the Washington monument to those whom Masons call profane, the uninitiated. So what's really interesting about that is this is saying the reason that this has been taken inside, and this isn't talking about the Trump inauguration. This is just talking about the building and the structure, what it represents itself. It's saying that inside of this building is this womb where gods are birthed. So if that woman on top is Isis, a composite god of Isis, well, Isis is really just Semiramis. The original trio is Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. So what you have is basically out of the womb of Semiramis, gods are birthed. Those that die become the Nimrod. They become the sun god. And you know that this is true because the Capitol has also this giant profane obelisk that just happens to be, when you consider the underground portion, exactly 666 feet high. And very clearly, we don't need to point out in any detail, is graphically showing the reproductive process. And you can see that this is the entrance, the reproductive process, and the Capitol building is the womb by which this is happening. And look, this is not something that was just put up for Donald Trump's inauguration. This has been there for a very long time. So when the 47, the Saturn, the 2025, the 2 plus the 5, all these occult meanings finally happens, the infrastructure is there for the Osiris to impregnate the Isis, and out of it comes the Tammuz. It's really incredible.
It is, we shared it earlier before we were recording. There was a clip, someone made a clip from Joe Rogan's show recently, his podcast, where he was talking about what it was like to be in the dome, because he was actually one of the few people that were actually at the inauguration. He was in the crowd there in the Capitol building, under the dome, in the womb of Isis, and he actually likened it to being somewhere that is somewhat profane. I really don't know how much Joe Rogan is. I'm not going to, cast a doubt on anybody and what their intentions are, what their heart is. But it just seems interesting that, somebody that was in that place during that inauguration, as we're looking at what the symbols really are talking about, that they would just say off the cuff, it was like being in a certain part of Satan's anatomy. And it was just like, wow.
No, it's telling because it's the same spirit. We started off by showing the Bible verses that says the end version of all this stuff is satanic. It's filled with demons. And then we see just the spirit of that permeating within the evangelical kind of movement. Now we're seeing the occult world kind of having this process that they've been waiting on and looking at for a very long time, kind of all facilitating to 2025, where Trump takes the 47 and this Saturn procession. Let's keep going here and discovering more of the meaning behind this apotheosis. According to the Masonic encampment, Osiris was rising within a new president in D.C. as Washington took his role as Osiris of the underworld. This is further simulated and symbolized by the 3-story design of the Capitol building. So most people may not realize the Capitol building is like a giant temple. Freemasons point out how the Great Pyramid of Giza was made up of 3 main chambers to facilitate Pharaoh's transference to Osiris, just as the Temple of Solomon was a 3-section tabernacle made up of the ground floor, middle chamber, and Holy of Holies. That's phraseology that you find in that sanctuary service that we're going to be talking about in depth in a couple episodes here.
All right, because Satan's not original in this. He's basically just a counterfeiter. So everything good that God does, there's a counterfeit for it. And if God is good and you try to break from God, it only can be darkness and negative. So the counterfeit is going to look like it's the thing, but it's actually the opposite. It's poison.
And that's exactly what we're seeing. Even the makeup of this Capitol building and it being the womb of Isis, and that it's made up of 3 sections, of which he has gone to the highest, most exclusive rung with the fewest amount of people that can be in there. And it wasn't a bunch of homeless and needy people in that inauguration room. It was essentially the elites of the world taking their place in this Holy of Holies, watching this initiation process unfold in front of with the obelisk aligning, directly with the womb. So when we say that it was 2016 for the people, 2025 for the insiders, you'll notice what was the garb color that they said Washington was wearing as he was anointed God?
It's purple.
Purple. This is the subtlety that's happening. People may not even thought that the color of his tie matters, but you'll notice in 2016, his color is red. By 2025, his and others around him clearly mark the purple. I mean, people can say this is coincidence. We're not telling people to believe anything. We want to say the only thing that we know is true is the Bible to be true. But this is all pointing to what the Bible has been warning us of. This is a system that is telling you that there are movements to transition for the ushering in of this final entity, Satan appearing as Christ. And we don't take this lightly. We're not alarmists. I feel kind of like sometimes, because I talk about this stuff a lot, even on the previous program I did, I feel like Noah, just saying the same thing over and over, trying to share with people that like Satan's appearing as Christ, it's coming in America, it's coming in the Protestant churches in America, and that Donald Trump is acting as this figurehead that's transitioning, paving the way for this final appearance to occur. He's spiritualizing the whole world.
Right. And, when Revelation 13:11 says, and then I saw coming up out of the earth a lamb-like beast, right, with the 2 horns, but one day will speak as a dragon, it tells you that it's coming up for the purpose of bringing all the power back into worship back to the first beast. And in the end, it speaks like a dragon. So if we look at, in the apotheosis of Washington, we see him wearing purple. He's the first president of the United States. So you see the beginning of this power that rises up for this purpose of bringing all the attention and worship back to the first beast. And now you have 47 being inaugurated in there, under that dome, in that womb, and you have the golden age that's about ready to begin. It's almost like the purpose of United States is finally coming to its final blossom of what it's supposed to do to prepare the whole world to receive Satan as Christ.
I totally agree with that. And I don't think that's alarmist. I don't think that's speculation. I don't think that's far-reaching. I think it's taking the information that's in front of us. And there's a reason that capstone, that pyramid with the separated capstone is there. There's a reason that the Novus, Ordo, Seclorum is there. America, from Bible prophecy to the occult side, has been destined to fulfill this age. And I would say that separated capstone is a perfect image of what that inauguration was. It was in an illuminated ceremony for the initiated and for the elite to witness this ceremony. But again, this is not the end of something. It's the beginning of something. He is there to transition. So let's keep going. We've got lots to cover still. The U.S. Capitol building was thus designed with 3 stories: Washington's tomb, the crypt, and the rotunda capped by a dome. Each floor has significant esoteric meaning regarding apotheosis, and the tomb of Washington is empty. That's interesting. The official narrative is that a legal issue kept the government from placing the body there. However, just as the tomb of Jesus Christ was emptied before his ascension, Washington is not in his tomb because he has traveled to the home of Osiris as depicted high overhead in the womb of Isis. Wow. Even knocking off the ascension of Jesus, that's why Washington's body's not there. Now, the public version is one thing, but if you ask the Mason why his body's not there, it's because they'll tell you that he has transferred to heaven to be a god. The womb of Isis is where they go at death to magically reach apotheosis and transform into gods. I mean, you can't really make this stuff up. I guess you can because Satan does. But what I mean is the amount of symbolism. Again, if we're presenting little pieces of evidence, the jury or the people watching, they can choose to believe as their conscience sees fit. But if we're looking at all this is either coincidence or we're looking at something that was staged beyond the Hillary versus Trump drama in 2016 or the stolen election in Biden in the previous election or even this one and kind of see what's actually happening. It's a Roman power that's in control, and the evangelical power is now coming on the stage to fulfill its role as the false prophet. And we have crossed a phase. This year is now crossing a phase into what seems to be the final phase before Satan appears as Christ.
And just like the Rome of old, the people are just being given circuses.
So when we're looking at what's happened, and we're looking at this dome, the womb of Isis, going into the apotheosis, the deification, we're looking at the Semiramis, Nimrod, Tammuz story over again and the process by which the Masonic ultimate ending, and I wouldn't just say Masonic, this is Mithra, this is Babylon, this is ancient mystery Babylon we're dealing with. Let's just make that clear. This is the same doctrines. This is nothing new. It's just telling you the story in many different ways. And God's telling you the best way to get it is the Bible. You could go in and decode all this stuff for yourself and spend all the time doing this, but ultimately it will just point back to saying, hey, all of this is in the Bible and you get the real version of it there. So now that we have all this information, we can start to pick apart why he did not place his hand on the Bible. The first aspect I want to point out is, and just to kind of show how he's surrounded with powerful Roman Catholics and Knights of Malta, he was sworn in by Chief Justice John Roberts. He's the first Catholic Chief Justice in history. And if people go back and watch, I think 3 or 4 videos ago where I touch on the hidden hand in the American elections, I actually show that John Roberts, after passing the Obamacare Act, which is basically socialized medicine, which is something the Vatican has wanted for America for a long time, as soon as he passed that, he raced off to the island of Malta because he was afraid of the backlash that would occur. So he is controlled and operates under the wing of the Knights of Malta. And here he is swearing in President Trump. Again, it's just kind of showing you this is, if we're talking about the beast system here, and we're saying, okay, Rome is this visible kingdom, Satan's visible kingdom on earth, then you literally have the beast power dealing with the head of the Christianized evangelical movement, the false prophet power, kind of all meeting at the head of this 47th presidential inauguration. It's quite amazing to see Bible prophecy coming to pass right before our eyes. So now I'd like to offer, now that we have all of this information, I'd like to offer some breakdown on what the meaning of no hand on the Bible is. If he really did just go through a process of deification, it would make sense why one who had just become deified or is going through the process of deification would not place their hand on the Bible. First, it says, breaking tradition. Every U.S. president traditionally places their hand on a Bible, signaling submission to divine or constitutional authority. Trump's choice rejects this act, implying departure from divine oversight and instead an oath unto himself.
Yeah, we see that in the Bible that the Lord says, I swear by myself. You know, it's like God is the only one that can swear on himself. So in a sense, swearing without the Bible is like swearing on yourself.
Yes, and there are going to be people, by the way, we just want to forewarn, We know that Melania showed up late and that's why he didn't put his hand on the Bible. But really, if we are watching this procession happen and Trump has just been deified, you would think he would not put his hand on that Bible, and that the powers that have put even Melania in the outfit to represent the Saturn age would be sophisticated enough to be able to have her delayed. So that could be a very convenient excuse for them to say why he didn't have his hand on the Bible. When in reality, I think it's pretty clear the 47th inauguration marks the transition from the material to the spiritual. Trump acts signifies not a covenant with God, but an ascension to godhood under the influence of Saturn. Now all of this symbolism is starting to make sense. Why he had to be 47. Why all of these things had to take place and he didn't put his hand on the Bible. He's fulfilling this role of godhood. Saturn's role is to prepare the world for the Antichrist figure. That's what that prophecy is saying. It's saying that it's not the Saturn that's the end-all be-all. It's the Apollo that comes after the Saturn reestablishes the old order, which is a return to the golden age, not a new golden age. Meaning that his refusal to swear on the Bible may symbolize the rejection of the biblical God in the favor of the new order. This act sets the stage for the coming leader, the Apollo figure, who will claim to be the true divine ruler of the world, the messianic figure prophesied in esoteric and occult circles, but in reality is the counterfeit Christ. Is that a biblical interpretation?
Yeah. What is it going to take for us to wake up and realize how close we are? We see that Satan's kingdom on this earth is getting ready to usher in this new age, and all of these signs are pointing to a coming climax on this earth of great deception and miracles and wonders, and we're just at the precipice of this. Are God's people even ready for any of this? Are we just sleeping and waiting for it to actually come and then be as the 5 foolish virgins that wake up and realize that it's too late to actually get ready?
That's why we're trying to sound the alarm now. We're trying to make it a loud cry, not by our power or our might, but because God has promised it will be a loud cry, that it will be a strong voice, a mighty angel's cry. And while that's not us, if we are just contributing some to saying, hey guys, something serious is happening here, in my opinion, it may not be 5 alarm territory, but it's like 4.5 alarm territory right now. I honestly think, in just looking at this on a very personal level, we are seeing the foundation laid before the final Antichrist shows up. Everything from the occult and biblical side seem to be saying that, and I don't think that's fanaticism. I think that's just taking it as literally and seriously as the evidence is showing us.
Yeah, and we know that not everybody can do the same things, but we can all like, share, and subscribe to try to get more people to see these things, to have these things revealed to them, that they would realize what's going on. Because many people think that something actually is going on ever since, ever since what happened in the last few years on this earth. People have realized that there's something really funny going on in the world, the way that all the governments of the world seem to be in lockstep, saying the same things, making the same decrees, the same rules. How did the whole world suddenly get together and work that out? If there wasn't something really funny going on behind the scenes. And so the world is ready for more information, and it needs the truth. And so the only truth as it is in Jesus Christ is what they need to hear. They need to understand about the sanctuary. They need to hear about what Christ's coming is really going to be like, so that they would not be fooled by the system that's being put in place right now.
So we essentially have 2 worldviews saying the same thing. The occult worldview is talking about the coronation of a king. That's a church-state kind of mindset that precedes this coming of Apollo. And the Bible worldview has a second beast that has all the power of the first beast. It will look lamb-like, so inferring a religious element to it, and it precedes the false second coming. I mean, we're seeing the alignment. Everything is meeting at a head here, and we're getting very, very close. One of the things I wanted to kind of touch on, we started off by saying Trump is this, from the occult version, their own words, he is a high occult magician. And I want to give some examples of what some of those magic tricks look like. So here, this king has been coronated, let's say. He now has his king's court, which I've never seen so many tech elites at one inauguration before in my life. We are now seeing the merging of the private with the public ownership. And in fact, Elon Musk, who's not an elected official, is up there with Donald Trump, with his son, little X, basically running around doing absolutely everything they want. Now, that is not something I've ever seen before in my life. Have you seen anything like that?
No, I was thinking too, the sort of Silicon Valley is usually put the money more on the left side of the spectrum politically. So it's kind of interesting that there's been a bit of synthesis going on in support for Trump, really. I mean, obviously he was elected by a popular vote, but there seems to be demographics that didn't normally vote for Republicans vote for a Republican this time. And it was sort of like he's a figure that really is sort of gathering people together to get ready for this transition that the occultist prophesied is going to take part. So yeah, all these people in his court here are very powerful people because we live in the age of the information, right? The internet. And so, who better to be in the court of the king than all these, in a sense, could be technocrats.
And technocrats is a perfect name for it because Elon's grandfather and his mother's May's father was a Canadian technocrat, and he would absolutely be thrilled with how Elon is performing right now. He's essentially the reason these technocratic elites are there is because they are responsible for transitioning everyone onto this final no buy, no sell system, which will be a merger of AI, blockchain, social media accounts, your whole ability to get on the internet dictated by digital ID. Maybe in the future we'll touch on some of the reality of this future no buy, no sell system. I did a couple episodes on that if you can find on my playlist. They're about the blockchain projects and the future of digital currencies. All of this is to introduce this final golden age. Again, it's the beginning stages of the final transition. And we're going to now look at some of the things of what magic tricks look like from a high occult magician, if this were to be the case. Trick number 1. I would say, before we get into that if you were to poll most of Trump's base, they would be anti-vax, anti-Bill Gates, anti-World Economic Forum, anti-central bank digital currency, and pro-Jesus / pro-America. Would you say that's probably a fair assessment for the majority of that base?
Yeah.
So now we're going to kind of compare and contrast this image that Trump's built for himself, which I think most people who voted for him would say that this is what he's about. Here's an article that says Trump leads and his party follows on vaccine skepticism. So he's painting himself as the anti-vax candidate. In fact, he put Mr. Anti-Vax candidate himself on his team when he brought in Robert Kennedy, which again has a long history with the Jesuit order that we're not going to get into today. He actually said that at one point to throw climate deniers in jail. So it's like this mindset that's forcing morality. It's all part of the same spirit. But there's no question, even this, the source cited says, as one of the leading figures in the modern anti-vax movement, he seems to be one of those key figures in it. So trick number 1 is being the anti-vax candidate, but in fact is part of the vaccine process itself. Now, we're not saying for or against health treatments or anything like that. This is simply just sharing. Somebody's saying one thing and the fruits of what they're doing says another. That's simply it. A good example of this is if he was really against all of the vaccine stuff as he kind of campaigned on, if he sat down with Bill Gates, most people would think that he would say, kind of like with Hillary, I'm going to lock him up. I'm going to, make sure that he can't do things like this anymore. And those two, they had a private meeting shortly after Trump was elected. And here's what Bill Gates had to say about it. He said, talking about Trump, in the COVID days, accelerated the vaccine innovation. So just to stop right there, the Mr. Vaccine himself, Bill Gates, is saying that Trump is the one who accelerated the vaccine innovation during COVID.
I believe it was called Project Warp Speed, actually.
Yep. Operation Warp Speed. Yep. And so Trump was the innovator of those things. So Bill Gates says, so I was asking Trump if maybe the same kind of thing could be done here. He was talking to him about mRNA capabilities and future vaccine efforts. He says, and we both got, I think, pretty excited about that. So instead of anti-vax guys saying you can go take that idea somewhere else, they're finding agreement and collusion on some of this stuff. He then goes on to say, I felt like Trump, was energized and looking forward to helping drive vaccine innovation. Gates said about the conversation during the nearly 3-hour dinner. He said, I was frankly impressed with how well Trump showed a lot of interest in the issues I brought up, which were digital identity, mRNA vaccination technology, and AI. This should be sending alarm bells for anyone on his support side. That to me, I don't understand how if you're anti-vax, you could have a conversation with 3 hours for someone like this and they leave saying positive things like this. On top of that, it wasn't just the thing with Bill Gates. He then, one day after being inaugurated, after going through the deification process, gets up to the presidential podium and gives it to Larry Ellison, who anybody who knows anything about Larry Ellison, I wouldn't trust that guy as far as I could throw him, and I wouldn't be able to throw him an inch. He then gives Larry Ellison and Sam Altman $500 billion for mRNA and AI vaccine technology. How has the base not gone crazy? Because this is what a master magician can do. He campaigns on the anti-vax premise and gives $500 billion and makes Bill Gates comfortable with his plan for this type of stuff moving forward. That's just incredible to me. Trick number 2, anti-WEF, but praises Klaus Schwab. So here again, he's got all these headlines. Trump vows to burn WEF to the ground following assassination attempt. Trump outlaws CBDCs, telling Schwab and the WEF to stuff it. Yet, we're going to see a video here. When he actually went to Davos just recently, they just had the Davos meeting. Trump went, and everyone was like, oh, Trump's disrupting the order, which is exactly what Marina Abramovich said. He's coming in to disrupt, to chaos. Yet, when he's actually put face-to-face with these people, look at how it goes.
Well, we've loved it. We think it's a great country, a beautiful country, and we have had a tremendous success.
Yeah, great success.
And this gentleman, as you know, he's done a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more question.
So here he is, Mr. Drainer of the Swamp, going to get all the bad guys out, kick out the Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and anti-vax, gives $500 billion for vax and AI technology, flies to Davos, shakes Schwab's hand personally, says, you're a gentleman doing a great job. It's a beautiful country doing great things here. I mean, how are people not just seeing that he's literally just playing everybody?
So we just want to make everybody 100% aware that we're not picking any political side here or anything. We're just trying to show you that everybody really is working, again, on the same side. You cannot say that you're, against the WEF and all those things, and at the same time, say that this man is doing a great job in what he's doing, because they're completely opposed to each other in this sense. And so there is going to be a synthesis that comes out of all of these things, a one big happy family that is coming out of this age that they're bringing about.
And this is why Jesus tells us that we'll know them by their fruits, because we can hear all the public rhetoric we want. What's he actually doing? And what he's doing is he's going to these globalist kind of conventions, which he's kind of campaigned on the fact that he is going to get rid of all this corruption. And yes, he pulled out of this accord and that accord, but we're seeing theater. When it comes down to it, Bill Gates is happy with what's going on. Klaus Schwab is happy with what's going on. And we're seeing a merger of all of these things. And for people who are saying, oh, well, you guys must be Democrats and you're leftists and all this stuff because you're only focused on Trump. The reason we're focused on this so much right now is because this is where the world is transitioning to. We're leaving the era of the woke agenda mindset, and it's moving to this religious worldview, clamoring for ages that unification of church and state's coming, forced religious principles are coming, miracles are coming, and eventually a false appearing that's actually Satan is coming. And all of that is tending toward what's happening around the administration, the Trump administration, given that it is seen as this Christian movement. But in fact, what we're seeing is it's this kind of Gnostic occult version of Christianity that has crept its way in. That's just ancient Babylonian mysticism. Trick number 3. Most of his base is anti-CBDC. That means central bank digital currency. Yet, they're pro-stablecoin. So Trump first gets into office, he signs an executive order immediately banning central bank digital currencies, and he's praised. But what most people don't realize is stablecoins are private versions of central bank digital currencies. I'll just give some examples here. So central bank digital currencies are issued from a central like banking source. That could be the Fed, it could be the IMF, it could be the World Bank, it could be some European central bank. But the bottom line is those are issued by central banks. Stablecoins, while not issued by central banks, they're issued by private entities. So while your CBDC that you get won't be issued by the IMF or the Fed, it will be issued to you by BlackRock, so who is actually the owner of the USDC stablecoin. So this is, again, like a magician does. He gets you looking over here, banning the CBDCs, and then allowing, and it's going to be a very large digital asset legislation package coming to the forefront very soon here, I'm sure, allowing stablecoins to come to fruition, when in reality, it still allows them to track, claw back, freeze, program, and do pretty much whatever they want with that currency. So again, people, I think, as they hopefully get more educated, will see that stablecoins really are a private version of central bank digital currencies. So Trump has pulled another trick on people by seeing this as some kind of victory. Trick number 4. Most of Trump's base, I would say, is pro-Jesus. In fact, here's one article that says he's anointed by God. Christians are seeing Trump as their savior. Here's one quote from a famous evangelical, Franklin Graham. You know his dad.
33-degree Freemason, Billy Graham.
Billy Graham, 33rd-degree Freemason Billy Graham, who is a large portion of why a lot of evangelical Christianity is far off base as it is. He cited Trump's win as this is a big win for Christians, specifically for evangelicals. He said, we believe the president will defend religious freedom where the Democrats would not. That's probably true in a lot of ways because it's moving towards this system of united church and state. The selection of Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel is already a hint that faith might shape some of foreign policy. U.S. evangelicals, including Huckabee, are among the country's most fervent supporters of who? Israel. And so this is where we kind of rubber meets the road. We keep kind of circling back. We just did a whole occult breakdown of this Trump inauguration. Here we are back at his government structure, and it's all filled with evangelicals who are worried about Israel. That's because they think that everything needs to happen with the third temple. Does Bible prophecy point to Israel or to America as the central focus for end-time events?
It points to America in Revelation 13. So again, if those of you who had not seen this presentation we did 2 presentations ago about Israel and America and prophecy, we invite you to go check out that video if you have not seen that yet, where we go through Revelation 13, a very thorough Bible study showing you all these things so you be not deceived.
Yeah, exactly. This question about Israel is going to come up again as we look at his cabinet and some of the people that make up his cabinet, because I think we're going to see more and more focus, no doubt, during his term of stuff happening around the third temple, just because of the amount of evangelicals that are around him that are pushing for this. So pro-Jesus is what he stands on. Even the MAGA phrase itself has an origin even in the Church of Satan. You see here, I have a direct picture from the website. It says the 5th degree of the Church of Satan is the MAGA. And when you're dealing with high occultism, people will say, oh, well, you're reaching, and MAGA could mean anything. People can apply stuff like this all the time. But you can say that, but now after we've presented a full body of evidence of what we're dealing with high occultists at the highest level of society that work so specifically to get Trump to be the 47th president so he could take this initiation process. We see that even the Jesuits, who are masters at language, they come in and they use things subtly that have an outward meaning and then a secret esoteric meaning. And that, I think, is what we're contending is happening here. Because MAGA is not only a 5th degree high Church of Satan rank, it also means some interesting things in some other languages. In Latin, it means witch. Portuguese, it means wizard or sorcerer. In Japanese, it means wickedness or evil. It means sorcerer in Italian, magician in Spanish. We're pointing over and over and making the case that Trump is this occult magician, and he just happens to have a phrase around him that is a Church of Satan title that means magician or sorcerer. That seems coincidental to me.
Yeah, there's going to be always a plausibility that you can find, another explanation for a lot of these things. But, and kind of like the Bible as well, there's plenty of evidence in the Word of God to believe and to trust in Jesus. It's, but if you want a hook to hang your doubt on, you'll find something to doubt. And I think the same thing when we present all this evidence, which seems to be voluminous, yeah, you can always find some plausible reason why that's not so or something. But when you have to look at the overwhelming amount of evidence, you just have to realize, don't get caught up in this world. Don't get caught up in politics.
Yep. And that it's all very planned. Like, again, you could throw this out and there would still be many, many other points of contention that would establish what we're saying here. The idea is he's pro-Jesus, but he's got all this witchcraft around what he's doing. And then from a policy standpoint, how could you stand on a pro-Jesus platform and advocate for a peace accord that's uniting religions, one of which says Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation, but then in order to unite, you throw that one part out. You say, you know what, let's not take Jesus, let's take Abraham instead. So part of the challenge that I see with the Abraham Accords is the basis of it is unification without Jesus.
Yeah, and just like Bailey said, there will be a Jesus that comes that's a different Jesus than the Jesus of the Bible, and that's the one that the whole world will accept.
As we're looking at Trump the magician, and how he's been able to say one thing, do another, and his base still supports him, we're starting to see more and more how high occult magic tricks work at a societal level. And really, it's stunning to me to see it happening, and I can only say thank the Lord that he's allowed us to see things so clearly, to be able to share things with people like this, because once you see it, to me, it becomes so overwhelming that everything he's doing is basically counter to what the Bible record would say we'd want our leaders to do. And again, this is not condemnation or judgment as much as it is I'm observing the fruits of what he's doing and seeing that replacing or removing Jesus is at the center of pretty much all the stuff we've reviewed today.
Yeah. Magic in itself, right? I mean, when we think of magicians, we think of sleight of hand, directing the audience to look in one place while you do something else with your other hand. I mean, that's how deception works, and there's mirrors and all sorts of things. But really, if we want to talk about magic in the sense of what people would call real magic, things miraculously, supernaturally happening, in a sense, it's also a deception as well, because part of the allure of being getting involved in magic is that you have the power to actually really do things. Mm-hmm. And sure, some things will happen, but if you realize the power really behind it, it's not you. It's not the words that you say. It's not any of those things. It's actually demonic. It's actually fallen angels doing these things. And that's really how these magic tricks work on society is the demonic influence. It's actually been permeated throughout our society in everything that we read, everything that we watch on television or the movies or anything in popular culture that is leading us away from Christ and opening our hearts and our minds to hear a different voice and a different spirit that speaks to our fallen nature. And we're seduced by that. And these magic tricks seem to work because there's a lot of demonic influence, just like it says in Revelation 18, that the whole world is going to be filled with this demonic. And Revelation 16, that these spirits are coming out of the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet to go to deceive the whole world. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what this magic is about. Magic in itself really isn't magic. It's the working of Satan.
Exactly. And that's what we're pointing to over and over, the whole concept. And then as he gets in, he just loads his cabinet with Vatican loyalists and globalist loyalists. J.D. Vance, as we covered before, he's controlled by Peter Thiel, who's a Knight of Malta. He groomed Vance from Yale, the Skull and Bones Society. Then you have Marco Rubio, who's been a long practicing Catholic, Vatican-controlled. Scott Bessent was the chief investment officer for the George Soros's personal management fund. So he basically stuck globalist George Soros' right-hand man in to run the Secretary of Treasury. Then he put Robert Kennedy, Mr. Anti-Vax, but he's long on the Jesuit order side, on the climate change issues, and then the Secretary of Defense, which is the last thing we're going to kind of look at today, just to kind of seal all this and come full circle to show how this comes all the way back to the Third Temple and this false version of prophecy that's happening that we keep harping on because it seems to be part and part with this golden age that's coming. So Trump's nominee, Pete Hegseth, he has quite an interesting background, and he has some symbolism on his body, on his tattoos, that kind of point to the order where he is loyal. Trump's nominee, Secretary for Defense, once suggested a temple could be built on the Temple Mount site. Now, people have said, this is a Nazi symbol. This is not a Nazi symbol. In fact, it's the symbol for the Holy Cross, the Jerusalem Cross, because Pete Hegseth is a member of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. He's called a Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, and this is an old kind of Templar offshoot. You can see here, Knights Templar International is claiming that it's a Templar cross, but specific to this Equestrian Order of Jerusalem. Now, this Equestrian Order is one of the oldest chivalric orders in the Catholic Church. It goes back to 1000 AD era. And what's interesting about them is their whole goal was to reestablish Christian dominance in Jerusalem and protect it in order to rebuild the third temple. Part of the Templars' mission was, they're called Templars because they wanted to build the temple. So Hegseth is now acting as a very powerful, in charge of the U.S. military, the largest, most powerful military in history, maybe, and is now in charge of it with the worldview that the third temple should be rebuilt, and that is classic dispensationalism, which was given to us by the Jesuit Francisco Ribera in order to shake people's understanding of who the false prophet and the beast and Antichrist really are. And so now, rather than take our word from it, let's hear what Pete Hegseth has to say on the matter.
And today, Jennifer and I and others had a chance to go see the western wall of the Temple Mount, the western wall tunnels, so much of the old city.
First things first, that Temple Mount site where they saw the western wall, I just want people to spend on their own time, if they have a chance. That is not a Jewish site. Even though everyone goes there thinking it's a Jewish site, if you look into it, it's actually the old wall of the Roman fort, Fort Antonia. And in some future episode, when we break down the Oslo Accords and the role that the Vatican and the Roman families are playing in controlling both Israel and Islam, we're going to look more at that Roman wall, that Wailing Wall of Fort Antonia. But even in the very basic structure of their worship process, what they think they're doing, they think they're worshiping some sacred temple wall. They're worshiping the Roman power. I mean, it's literally everywhere.
And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle. 1948 was a miracle. 1967 was a miracle. 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible. I don't know how it would happen. You don't know how it would happen, but I know that it could happen. That's all I know. And a step in that process, a step in every process, is the recognition that facts and activities on the ground truly matter. And that's why going and visiting Judea and Samaria, understanding that sovereignty, the very sovereignty of Israeli soil, Israeli cities, locations, is a critical next step to showing the world that this is the land for Jews and the land of Israel. And I believe, as was mentioned, he said you need to, what was mentioned is you need to buy the ticket. Don't just wish for 40 years to win the lottery, buy the ticket. I would submit to you, in light of the support you have in Washington, D.C., the support you have amongst patriotic Americans, amongst evangelical Christians, amongst believers, amongst Republicans, even amongst some Democrats who can barely say it anymore in Washington, buy the ticket, take your action, do what needs to be done here in Israel, because I truly believe this is a moment where America will have your back. You have Donald Trump in the White House. You have Mike Pence as vice president. You have Nikki Haley at the UN. You have true believers in Israel and America that have your back.
So we very clearly hear that Pete Hegseth is speaking to at the King David Hotel, and he's obviously speaking to in Jerusalem, speaking to a group of Jewish people, and he's very much promoting that the U.S. government is behind them getting the third temple. Did you hear the same thing I did there?
The U.S. is playing its role right now, and its role in bringing, all the attention and the worship back to the first beast, I should say, or maybe the attention, but the worship back to the first beast. Part of it is this whole thing with false prophecy being fulfilled in Israel.
Mm-hmm. When Roman Catholic principles come under care and protection of the state, and while that finalizes in Sunday worship, what we're seeing is Roman Catholic principles are coming under care and protection in the form of Christianizing the government towards a false prophetic worldview, making sure that that the people that are in the power in the U.S. government have this view towards Israel, so these things can happen. I mean, we're witnessing the Christianization of the U.S. government, which is exactly what Project 2025 set out to make happen. And as we looked at in the last episode, Trump, again, another trick he's playing. He's saying, I don't know about Project 2025. And then the first things he does is exactly in alignment with the plan that they laid out. So here's another video where they're now talking. He's talking to Senator Tom Cotton, and I just found this fascinating because we're not going to touch on Zionism today because we've already been going for a very, very long time. But Zionism is something that we're going to tackle in the future, is showing that this is not a movement that is God-breathed. Not only is the premise based on the Israelite people's role at the end of time and their fulfillment of those things based on a wrong interpretation of Daniel 9 and the 70 weeks, which we've already started tackling and we will more in the future. But it is also a movement that was started by the Rothschilds, which is really a Roman effort, since they're just representatives of these Roman families, to establish Israel as a nation state so they could pull off this whole false version of prophecy. So when you see your Secretary of Defense and one of your senators from Arkansas both saying, we're Christian Zionists, what's wrong with that? That tells you that the people are doctrinally deficient and malnourished in the Word of God to have such a wrong understanding of prophecy, which we're going to try to tackle in love and in respect. So people who also believe like they do see that we're not attacking here. We're simply just trying to show from the Bible that all of these things are a false version of Christianity that's going to deceive pretty much the whole world unless we get really right with our Bibles and understanding what it's actually saying.
If the warning is that the whole world is going to, could be deceived and are going to wander after the beast, if it's probably the main popular thing that everybody's doing in Christianity, it's probably not the truth.
Otherwise it wouldn't be a remnant, would it? So all of these things are kind of giving us the framework to see whether this is real Christianity or whether this is the false version that we're supposed to be warned of. So here's the clip of them dialoguing on this.
Being a Christian Zionist, I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist. Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history. Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense, and the way America comes alongside them is a great...
Spoken like a true knight of the Order of the Sepulchre, because he's not interested as much in the Jewish people as he is about rebuilding that temple so they can be raptured away, the pre-tribulation rapture, which, brother, we'll be tackling for sure in the future. So just quickly, I'm not even going to go through these because it's just so clear. Anybody who wants to go look at what the Order of the Holy Sepulchre is all about, the bottom line is Hegseth is in an order that is under the direct protection of the Holy See, where the Pope is the sovereign of the order. So part of being a knight is you don't get knighted into knighthood unless you pledge first loyalty to who? Another country's king or president? No, it's going to have to be to whoever heads the order of those knights. So Hegseth is technically, if he were to ever, let's say, do something against the Constitution, he wouldn't be considered a treason because he technically is part of a sovereign order. Sovereign means that no other nation or power has rule over him. So he essentially is saying, I'm giving you, Pope, first loyalty, and I am going to carry out the will according to my first loyalty, even if it's against the country that I am a part of, because I have given my first right of sovereign loyalty to you. Hence the chest tattoo, hence the emphatic, I support Israel. So we see just how real and how prevalent this is. People should not be afraid to talk about this, because without acknowledging the reality of the situation we're in, we're not going to be ready for what's coming next.
In fact, the entire system that's at work here, has occult underpinnings, right, throughout the whole thing, or Masonic, Freemasonry, or Illuminati, or whatever you want to call it, the whole thing. There is a loyalty and a fealty to other than nations and countries and constitutions. It really is a cabal that is loyal to Lucifer ultimately, and it's right there on the dollar bill of the United States that we are in this system here on this earth at this time that is preparing for Lucifer to come.
Mm-hmm. And he's in charge of the military that may be responsible for helping bring some of this all together. Now, so you'd ask Pete, he's got an American tattoo here and a Holy Jerusalem cross here. If his country and his Pope say two different things, who's he going to obey? Curious question. I wonder what he'd say. And that's why they have all those hearings, by the way. It was traditionally put there so people could question about conflicts of interest, and there would be like a real vote to see if they would allow this person. But today's version of it is such a dog and pony show, it's like not even worth watching except to just confirm that what the Bible says is real. The last thing we're going to touch on here before we close out is that kind of typify everything that we've said about how Trump is being viewed and how he's viewing himself. This just showed up at Mar-a-Lago. It's a golden goat with golden hooved feet covered in $100 bills. That's Trump's face superimplanted on it. And instead of "In God We Trust," it says "In Trump We Trust." So this is about as pagan idol-y as it gets. And it kind of goes to show the narrative of Trump being this God figure who's going to save everyone, not Jesus Christ who saves his people from their sins. And so as we're looking at all these pieces coming together, I hope people can see that, we're not just speculating. Each little bit of evidence builds a case. The Bible clearly says we need to test the spirits, try them whether we know they are of God, because many false prophets are gone into the world, which is what we're seeing now more and more. And the measure by which we measure everything is to the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it's because there's no light. It doesn't matter if they're revealing all or exposing all of these things that are fraudulent. We have to say if it's not in accordance and speaking to this word, it's because it's no good. That's our ultimate standard.
It is the ultimate standard. And that's why we also look forward to bringing more presentations that are going to be very Bible-based with deep, thorough study of the Bible so that all would understand how to handle the Word of God and exactly what the Word of God says about all of these things that we've been talking about.
It says, and we shouldn't be surprised that they're covering themselves in robes of righteousness, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ, just like we're seeing. And we should marvel because Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having a great wrath, because he knows he has but a short time. Things are going to get more intense because really the clock is running out, and Satan knows it. The Bible is telling us exactly what to expect.